The real meaning of the word crisis is turning point. And when we have these turning points in our life, when we have loss, when we have pain, we have an opportunity to take that point and do something with it, that turning point.
It is a rare spirit who would see a cancer diagnosis as an opportunity for personal growth, but that's Paul Dewar, ever philosophical. When the popular former MP announced earlier this week that his brain cancer was now terminal, love and support poured in from all sides, and even in the face of such a difficult prognosis, he is determined to make a difference. Rosie sat down with him earlier this week. Their conversation in a moment, but first, a little background.
It is grade 4, which is terminal.
This past Tuesday, Paul Dewar spoke publicly for the first time about his prognosis.
There is no cure. There is treatment.
The former NDP MP confirmed he has glioblastoma, the same kind of brain cancer Gord Downey died from last year. Dewar is well thought of within the party he once represented.
Such a huge heart who's done so much for the community, does so much for progressive politics.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to start by recognizing Paul Dewar.
That respect extends across party lines as well. Now he's giving back and launching an initiative called Youth Action Now. In an open letter, Dewar outlined how he wants to spend his remaining time. I met up with Paul Dewar at his home in Ottawa earlier this week. Good to see you.
Good to see you, Rosemary.
Let's start by how this came about, like how you found out.
Well, it was actually on February 8th, I went to the Ottawa Civic Hospital because my left arm was giving me a lot of pain. It's very heavy, and Julia said to me...
Your wife?
Yes, my wife, Julia. Said, I think we need to get that looked at. And initially thought maybe it's something to do with my heart, a stroke, maybe some pulled muscle. And I had been out for a very long skate, thought it was just maybe an injury. But
because you're a really fit, athletic guy.
I run, I skate, I'm very active. And so I went into the hospital, and long story short, they did some CT scans. And it just so happened I took my left arm, put it over my head because they were scanning the left arm. And when the results came back, they found a tumor on the right side of my brain. And
like they weren't scanning your head?
No, it was just a complete coincidence that they found it. And, you know, some days I think, thank God they found it. Other days I think maybe if they hadn't, I wouldn't have to be dealing with all this. But what happened then was quickly they did a diagnosis that it was a brain tumor. And on February 14th, so just a couple of days later, I had awake cranial brain surgery, which means that I was awake. And I had an amazing surgeon. I joked with my kids. I said, you can brag that your dad was operated on by Drake, because Dr. Drake happens to be the name of the surgeon. So that was kind of fun. But it happened so quickly. Yeah. And it was a big shock. And obviously it changed the way things were going in my life.
Mm-hmm. You only told people, though, that it was this terminal kind of cancer this week.
That's correct.
Were you worried about saying that out loud?
We were. And I'll be honest with you, we had thought of being public earlier. And I've always been very open. And when we had the diagnosis, we made sure that everyone in our family was part of that. So Nathaniel and Jordan, my two sons, the surgeon asked us, do you want them to be here when we give you the news? And we said, absolutely. And it was a difficult decision because I thought, well, how far do we go with this? But we knew at some point that was going to become public. And so
you are a public person.
Well, and people were aware of what was happening.
Did you think of Jack?
Yeah. I mean, you know, yes. So after the 2011 election, as you know well, we were all hopeful that things had turned around.
Yes.
And then we got that news, and it shook all of us to the core. And I thought, it's different for me, And I thought it's probably a good thing to be open about it as soon as possible, and to share as much as possible with the people that I know and the people who I know would want to know. And so, I learned from his experience, and certainly, yes, he's been on my mind a lot lately.
Yeah. What happened when that news came out on Tuesday? I couldn't. It was a lot.
It was.
A support came out for you.
And there was incredible love and support from all over the country, from people from all political persuasions, and really was touching was all of my colleagues and former colleagues from the House.
We have all heard the very sad news about Paul Dewar, and we're thinking about him and his family. While we may sit on different sides of the aisle, we are all colleagues here together.
On behalf of the entire Conservative caucus and my constituents in Paul Dewar's hometown, we offer him all of our prayers and all of our love in this area.
I always appreciated when people got up in the House to say things genuinely and sincerely, and I saw that response, not expecting it at all, of course, but and that was very touching.
So at what point did you say to yourself, this is all happening, and I'm just going to add something else to it and start a youth initiative and try and get some money and what point did you say, that's a great idea, Paul?
That's a really good question, Rosie, because it was the question around the House here. Yeah. The same day I was operated on was the same day as the high school shooting in Florida. And that story really affected me as it did so many people. And it was this really interesting mix of horror, but absolute inspiration, because when I watched, like many people did, the response of those young students who really just said, we're not going to do things the way they've been done before. And we're going to take things on ourselves. And we're going to show so-called adults what matters. But I don't know about you, but I was so friggin' inspired by that. And that stayed with me. And then I thought of all the things I'd done as a teacher, as an MP, and the things that I really enjoyed doing, and then started talking to Julia and friends and thought, let's do something. I've got some time left to live, and let's live, and let's do something with that time I have.
What is it in you that even in a moment like this says public service, more public service?
So when I was diagnosed, I randomly opened up this book, which is a collection of reflections from a parish priest friend of my family's, Father Corbinetti. And the title of it was A Rusty License Plate Called Trust. And the first part of that reflection was, the real meaning of the word crisis is turning point. And when we have these turning points in our life, when we have loss, when we have pain, we have an opportunity to take that point and do something with it, that turning point. And I just took that and thought, this is a turning point in my life. What am I going to do with it? And I just thought, this is actually, and this is going to sound strange, but this is it's a gift that's been given to me to do something with. And so when I saw my mom, Nathaniel and Jordan, and thought about them, I just decided that, this is their youth, they're young guys, and I see what's happening in the world. I thought, let's do this.
There was a quote in I think it was the Ottawa Citizen article that struck me. I think it's from your pastor, who said, you face death and walk back into life.
It's so true.
I had never heard that before.
No, and it's Brian Cornelius, who's a minister who's been helping me through this journey. And he said, first of all, when the diagnosis, and he said, well, I'll give you my best, summation from someone who's a pastor. And he said, this sucks. Which is what my son Jordan said too. I said, you know, you went to how many years of seminary school or ministry to come up with it, but he was right. But then he said to me, you know, what you're really dealing with is what you're having to do is to face death and walk back into life. And I know we've all in our culture talked about the fact that, you know, death is going to happen, but we also avoid it when we can, right?
Yeah.
And I've held on to that because it's so true. And that's the gift part. I mean, we all are going to die, right? And so it's a matter of what we do with this life we have. And so Brian's point was that you know that the timeline's maybe a little earlier than you might have thought. But you now walk back into life and you can decide how that's going to work.
It's a beautiful way of thinking about it.
It is, it really is.
Yeah.
And it's been so helpful.
You've got, you know, this legacy piece that you're trying to get in place.
Yeah.
You're spending time with your friends, your family, or visiting your colleagues. What is the thing that you want a little bit more of?
I really would just like to have more time with those two guys and Julia. And if I could steal more of that time, and I hopefully will, that's what I want.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rosemary.
Nice to see you. Appreciate it very much.